So what we have been doing around web components and try to kind of fit that into Vaadin framework. So I'm going to be speaking a bit about those, a bit about web components and where they are going in general, and kind of showing a lot of experimental, half-working stuff. But before that, I thought maybe it would be fair for the second 50% of the room who don't know Vaadin to kind of give a quick intro to Vaadin, like 5 minutes on what Vaadin is all about. And they actually have a booth over there in the expo area, and the guys will be happy to kind of show you more about Vaadin. So it's a user interface framework for building rich web apps. That means basically it's a set of UI components that you can use in Java on the server side to build your applications. We try to focus on rich user experience and developer product. We try to kind of combine those two things. And it has been pretty successful for the past 14 years now. So it's been around for a while. The way how we have been doing this, and mainly how we have been able to kind of increase developer productivity, have been wrapping HTML with the Java APIs. So sometimes I've been saying to some guys that it's kind of user interface framework for the server-side Java guys. So if you are doing everything on the server side in Java, that's perfect for you. You can build nice, rich-looking stuff. So I'll show you what kind of apps is typically built with that. So I guess the most typical thing is to build dashboards and internet applications with a lot of graphics, a lot of data, lazy loading data from the server side, kind of rich layouting, drag and drop, and that kind of stuff. Cool thing, everything over here is built in Java. So you don't have to write anything on the client side in JavaScript in order to build this kind of application. So it's quite kind of handy way of doing that. In order to see what kind of components are in there, you can go to Vaadin sample and kind of browse through the components, take any of the components, see how they work, see how to build an application like that, see the source code, maybe play around with that a bit. You can, let's say, for this component, that's like now in US locale, you could change the locale to, let's say, Vietnam, and then you have a totally different kind of experience. So that's basically what Vaadin is all about right now. Let's go back to the presentation. It basically works on all the browsers. So on the client side, you don't need to have anything else than a modern web browser. Any kind of mobile device will do. We support everything since IE 8. So basically, more or less, you can support anything on the business environment. How it works really is that you write Java like this. It's running on the server side, so of course you can use lambdas. When user goes to your web page, it basically loads a bunch of HTML. This is auto-generated by the framework. It renders something on the screen. You interact. Those interactions are sent over the wire, maybe over AJAX, maybe over push. It's your choice. And that goes to your code on the server side Java. You do some modifications over there, and the UI is updated. So that's basically Vaadin framework. Now to something completely different to confuse you. So now you know Vaadin framework, and let's see if you know Vaadin framework in 50 minutes or so. So there have been pretty strong trend on the web related to client MVP or MVC or model view, whatever things, and these have been disrupting the space. I mean, this guy have been like the primary disruptor in the space. Who's using Angular, by the way? That's the second half of the room. So the first ones were using Vaadin, and the second half are using Angular. This is actually pretty exciting stuff. If you compare that to Google Web Toolkit, I think Google Web Toolkit, who's using, by the way, Google Web Toolkit? Only a couple of guys. It's still alive. It's really good, actually. I think it's actually, we just arranged a conference around GUID last week and had 656 attendees in Mountain View and Munich. So it's actually booming right now. But AngularJS is doing really, really well compared to that. So it has been kind of exploding in the space. So why is that? What's cool about AngularJS?
Doesn't require a server-side?
I think it's kind of, there are multiple things that are cool. One of the coolest things, I was discussing with Misko, who's the father of AngularJS, and he said it's like spreadsheet. And I was thinking, what? How come it's like spreadsheet? Who remembers this guy? Lotus 123. So this kind of changed how people build business apps, because it was a completely different model. I think Misko is right. So in AngularJS, it's kind of spreadsheet for HTML. So why is that? If you think about spreadsheets, you see these kind of references all over the spreadsheet. But that's the same thing with AngularJS. You are referring from DOM node to another one and kind of binding these together. And it's a pretty powerful concept. I mean, with the first one, you get all the business people to think that they can build business applications. That's a major shift from what was there before. I mean, building things in COBOL. And with AngularJS, actually designers and front-end developers, they start to build and can build prototypes that work really well without programming a single line of JavaScript code. So it's kind of really expressive way of doing things. Of course, if you have your team building a brilliant prototype that works really well technically, and you have these designer guys over there building a shitty prototype, but it looks really nice. And both of these prototypes, they are kind of presented to your business owner. Guess who wins? And when it happens that the designers win, then the big boss over there, he decides that it looks pretty good, it looks like it's even almost working, so maybe you developer guys, you do some plumbing on the back end and it should be fine. And then you swear and build some RESTful services and try to hack it together. But that's pretty powerful to put the designers in the lead, because these guys, they can make nice looking applications. Of course, AngularJS is nice in developer productivity as well, and there is really powerful tools for testing, so it's really good for developers as well. What I'm guessing is that the web components are the next disruptive trend, and for me it's really important to understand how it disrupts and how we could leverage the disruption. Who's using web components? I guess no one. Who knows what are web components? 1/3. Okay. So you could say it's a set of standards with the nice looking logo, looking a bit like HTML5. It's actually part of HTML5. You could say that it's a way to put the tag on the web page, and with that tag you get something fancy happening. I mean, it's useful. You can get the blink tag back. Or you could say that web components, it's a set of standards. So you have a custom element standard for defining new tags to your HTML page. That's powerful, right? You have HTML imports for actually importing those models to your web page. So it's kind of a way of, kind of Mavenized way of building your web apps. Or it's templating, because AngularJS and the guys proven that the templating is pretty powerful on the client side, so why not build that into HTML5 directly? And it's isolation, it's called shadow DOMs that kind of make it possible to you to build quite complicated DOM trees on your web page without your user seeing those directly. Kind of encapsulation. So does it matter actually? I mean, these standards, do they disrupt by themselves? I don't think so. Nice things, but they don't change anything. Except, I think that those things, they actually deliver a couple of really powerful concepts. You can build, you can simplify the web app by building out of ready-made components. You can reuse those components. They are reliable, so it's a kind of similar value proposition as frameworks like Vaadin have been bringing for the developers for a while. And with those components, that's the same pitch that we have had for many years. That you just take those Lego blocks, you build your UI out of these, and it's so easy to play with those blocks that in no time you're going to build a nice-looking, rich application. So with this, you could basically have the same value proposition as guys like these, like Vaadin, Google Web Toolkit, XJS. So these have been providing really nice component-oriented frameworks in the on the market, and people have been enjoying these. But now it's a standard coming up who is providing the same thing. And they are kind of conflicting. So are we doomed? Should we just go away and then say, okay, you have the web components, we go away? I think there is a, if you look at the value proposition, that has some kind of value in that. So Google Web Toolkit, basically it provides components, Vaadin provides components. That's kind of core value. Both provide statically typed Java, so that's nice. You can have a higher level language to write your applications in. Vaadin provides automated communication, so you don't have to write all this communication code by yourself. But now with web components, kind of components start to be commodity. All the frameworks will have nice components. So we are kind of have only these things in our value propositions left. And at the same time, these cool kids on the block, they will get components, and they have new value propositions as well. It's not just that they get components, they have other good sides as well. So I would kind of argue that web components, they will be disrupting the space quite a bit, and the frameworks like Vaadin, they have to adapt to that, they have to leverage that, and they have to innovate something new. I see this is a positive thing. I mean, now there's a new market opening and we can be on that market, and we have quite a bit of experience on building good web components. So let's build web components. And that leads to our topic, Vaadin components. So let's see what we have been hacking. So this is experimental. Don't try this at home, or please try this at home. We'll see. So we just opened Vaadin Labs. It's a new part of the site where we have different kind of experiments. The experiment that I want to showcase right now is Vaadin components. Primary demo over there is of course, we are from the enterprise space, so everybody is building CRUD type of views. So we decided let's build a CRUD type of view. So there is a table with some kind of data. These are superheroes. We choose any one of these, and we can see the guy over here. It's a pretty typical CRUD, some kind of map over there. We can edit this. Let's add a couple of points to him. He's a smart guy anyways. We can even call him. I don't know if you have sound or not. We don't have sound. So it would actually call to him.
If you have nothing important to do, come and stop by my place.
So typical kind of enterprise application with a lot of data, some component inside. And this is kind of bread and butter of Vaadin and GUID and XJS. And if you take a look at this actually is a component-oriented application. So let's open up a Chrome inspector and see what's inside. And we'll start, let's say, right over here. So here is our, can you see anything? I'll zoom in a bit. So this is the application Hero app. And the cool thing is this Hero app thing is actually just a tag. It's an element on the web page. And inside the element is a shadow root. So this is the shadow DOM that is hidden from the rest of the web page. Over there we have a list. So this is a list of heroes. We have a details. So that's basically the details view for it. And that's about it. We have some styling. So here is a core styles. This actually leverages Google Polymer framework. So this core style, for example, comes from Google Polymer. And if we take a look at the hero list, we are using Ajax from Polymer framework. So this is actually not the Vaadin application at all. This is a Polymer application. And I think this is the model how Google thinks that the web apps will be built in the future. Then there's an interesting thing, this vGrid. So this is actually a Vaadin component. Who have seen Vaadin grid component? Some guys from who are using Vaadin. So it's a next generation data grid component in Vaadin. But this thing over here is just an element on the web page. So you can actually use grid component on any web page as an element. And inside that there is a table and rows and whatnot. Actually, cool thing about this one is that if you look at, let's see. Or maybe I don't demo it right here, it's a bit. So I guess that's about this demo. That's the way you're going to building rich web application and web components. There are a couple of other examples as well, like let's say this one over here, just kind of binding a couple of components together. This slider bound to this input element, bound to this progress bar. And over here you can see how you actually do it. So there are input element and a couple of Vaadin components packaged as a web components and JavaScript updating these. Except that there are also AngularJS version. So you have the same elements over here, but you can now also declare Angular model and bind Vaadin components to each other with Angular. So these are pretty kind of generically usable. So let's see in practice how it would work. I have this really fancy demo that I actually prepared 2 hours ago. So it's like this. Isn't it cool? So it's an HTML table. I wanted to list some Unicode characters. And how did I do this? Of course, with the shell script. So kind of traditional way of doing it. Static web page. I used bash script to generate a couple of lines of HTML. So it's just a static web page. What's the limitation of this approach? So why this is bad? It's a trick question. Unicode has more than 500 characters. And in order to put together a static web page with more than 500 characters, it might be unpractical. So what we can do actually over here, take this static web page and convert this table to a Vaadin component. So let's see, v-grid. And let's say theme is Vala. That's the new theming engine that we do have. Save it and reload the page. And poof, now it's a Vaadin grid component. And with this Vaadin grid component, the cool thing is that you can actually have as many lines as you want to, and it performs really, really well on all the devices. So what you see over here is a bunch of rows on a table, but we only have those rows that are visible on the DOM. So if you have, let's say, 1 billion lines, we still have 10 lines in the DOM where we use them. We use hardware accelerated graphics on all the mobile devices. We kind of support touch gestures for scrolling these around. So it's actually a pretty advanced component. But even so, we have just 500 characters over here. So maybe we could do it a bit more dynamic. So instead of having this stuff over here, we could just delete, or let's leave it over there and just write a bit of JavaScript. So we now have a grid component, just queried from DOM. And let's see what we want to do. We want to say grid set, sorry, that was the server-side thing. Over here we set just a data source and set the function to be a data source. And with the function, this basically grid start to ask us what should we show. So we get index and count. How many rows should we be showing? So we could just create those over here. Let's say var rows. And maybe from 0 to I is less than count. So we need count rows. For that, we want to create rows. So let's say the index would be j, so that would be I plus index. So row number j, let's construct that as rows push. So in a row we have 2 columns. We push first the the index, and then we push the character that we want to show. So it would be like string dot, how you actually write it? From char code and J. Let's see. I'm really bad with JavaScript, so I'm probably making mistakes. And then just return these rows. Return rows. Okay. So now actually one more thing that we should be doing is that we should say how many rows do we want. And because this is now dynamic, we could set the row count to be, let's say, 10,000. So now it's clearly a better version of the same thing, except that it doesn't work. Anybody see the mistake over here? Data source, row count 1,000, 10,000. That's strange. I have a typo somewhere. Let's try again. Let's not worry about that because I happen to have the same type right over here. So there is one typo somewhere, but I'm not going to be debugging that. So basically we get 10,000 rows of characters, and it basically generates those rows while I'm typing. So that kind of stuff you can do with vgrid component. Of course, this is a bit kind of boring way of writing this because probably you want to kind of load those rows from server side. So what you can do, you can do the same thing asynchronously with callbacks. We support REST data sources and whatnot. But I don't know if you had to kind of live code these. You can go to Vaadin Labs and see a couple of examples from there. So what we have right now in Vaadin components, we just released 0.1 last week. There are 3 components. We started with the most complicated one, that basic grid, and a couple of other components just to see that if we can get the packaging right. So this is really, really experimental. There are many, many bugs, and I wouldn't recommend for you to use that yet in production. But we would appreciate your feedback on whether this is a good direction to go. And we'll be, over the coming months, we'll be releasing new versions of this, basically moving more and more of the Vaadin components to this Vaadin components package so that this could be used on the client side. Another reason because there are multiple UI component frameworks for client side and multiple component libraries on the client side. One of the reasons why you might want to use Vaadin is that we have this Valo theming engine. Who has heard of this? So this is our way of solving the problem that you guys want to build the theme for this component that looks exactly like your application theme, not like the stock theme. I mean, you remember the era when people were building Visual Basic 6 applications. They were really productive, but all the applications looked pretty much the same, and they pretty horrible. And I think a couple of years back when iOS 7 came out, we had a bit embarrassing situation. We were building this Vaadin TouchKit product that looked exactly like iOS 6. And we released that like a couple of days after iOS 7, and it was an embarrassing situation. And then we had these Android guys asking that, hey, why my Android application looks like iOS 6? So we started thinking we should kind of find a way of building different themes easily for Vaadin. And what we kind of thought were that you could and you should be able to easily build those themes. Of course, in Vaadin there is a CSS-based theme, so you could build different versions of the same UI easily. If the UI is small, like this one, so login box, we can have different variations of this one, built pretty simply, but just with CSS. But in Vaadin framework, you have a lot of components. So if you have all these dozens and dozens and dozens of components, kind of building a universal theme for that is quite hard. So with this, you can basically take a bunch of theming parameters, say these to this theming engine, and it generates theme for you. It also is resolution independent, so that works without any bitmaps on most devices. And you can go and try it out on Vaadin demos. The second reason to use Vaadin components right now is basically grid. Grid is a pretty powerful component. We have mostly been focusing on the things that are behind the scenes with grid. So making it super fast to scroll, super fast to lazy load. So we are practically kind of reusing DOM nodes and kind of optimizing memory consumption and memory leaks on the client side to make it fast on all the devices. We detect that if it happens to be iOS 8, then we can use kinetic scrolling from iOS 8 automatically. If it happens to be like iOS 7, we actually measure the speed, how fast your finger is going while you kind of lift the finger off the screen and try to simulate kinetic scrolling and do pretty advanced stuff under the hood. You can have multi-level headers, footers, you can put components in those headers, footers. You can render inside any of those cells. So you can basically render complicated stuff like graphics inside each of these cells in a really high performance manner because we are reusing the DOM nodes. And you can even put like widgets inside over there. So how this is actually coming together with the Vaadin framework? Vaadin framework basically have been providing all of these three different value propositions, and now we actually are concerned that we split the framework in two different products. Vaadin framework basically being the server-side Java framework, and then a completely separate product called Vaadin Components. And this Vaadin Components product, it's purely on the client side. It doesn't have any server-side or any Java relations. So of course Vaadin framework is using those components, but we hope that the Vaadin components will be used widely with the other frameworks as well. Let's say with this AngularJS and Meteor and whatnot you are using on the client side. It works in such a way that these are full-fledged web components following those web component standards. We have our AngularJS API on top of these, Google Web Toolkit APIs, both widget API and elemental API on top of this component, and then we have a server-side Java API, all in one component. So let's take an example how you work with Vaadin today. If you want to kind of build this kind of UI, traditionally you have been coding this in Java in a Swing-like fashion on the server side. Now we're releasing Vaadin 7.4, and it includes declarative syntax for actually declaring these. And we have been planning for a while to have a declarative syntax built with XML, and then we kind of scrapped the whole idea. It's a bad idea. These web components were coming along, and we started thinking, even though you cannot use web components that widely yet, maybe we could build a syntax on top of web components. So with Vaadin 7.4 today, you can use declaration like this to build this UI. So you have all the Vaadin components available as web components here. We are faking it a bit. They are not real web components, but they look like them. We are interpreting this on the server side and rendering this guy on the screen. So that's actually pretty powerful because that's like future-proof in a way that it works well with web components as well. So when we have this construction already, declarative syntax, Vaadin framework, and nice-looking components on the screen, we continue from there and add a designer. So we are now in process of releasing a Vaadin designer built into Eclipse where you can draw the UIs interactively. And you can go back and forth between the declarative syntax and kind of visual editing. And the cool thing about this is that it's not just about building the UI. You can actually test the UI while you are building it. So what I mean with this is that you say that, hey, I want to open this on my mobile device. It shows you a QR code. You can take a snapshot of that. And the UI that you are drawing right now is live on that mobile device. You can give that to your boss who want to have a button over there. And you can literally draw the button at the same time as he's holding that device. And that pops up right then on the device while you are drawing it. So that kind of opens us possibilities for collaborating with design teams and business owners. So right now this is built into Eclipse. We are looking into building an IntelliJ version of this as well, and I hope maybe a cloud version later on. So with this chain we have Vaadin Designer for building the declarative UIs, we have a framework for rendering these. Looks pretty good. Except that in the future we can also add real web components on the right side. So the benefit for the server-side Java guys is that if you have real web components over here, we could actually do clever stuff like pre-rendering on the server side. You know, when you're starting Vaadin application or a GUID application right now, you get this spinner while it's loading the stuff from the server side. Maybe in the future it could actually show just a web page that looks like the ready-made application, not the spinner. This is actually a trick that is today done by Google Inbox. Who has seen Google Inbox? So it kind of pops right up and it's like a static web page, and then it wires up all the event handlers behind the scenes. And that's huge kind of step up from Gmail where you see this progress bar for 10 seconds. So we can do that kind of optimization automatically by just adding web components to server-side Vaadin framework. But this picture actually got us thinking that if we have all these three things, why not kind of make the centerpiece exchangeable? I mean, Designer, it's a commercial product, so that kind of gives us a business model. We can sell tooling for developers who are using our components. These components would be compelling for many other framework audiences as well, not just Vaadin framework users. So why not kind of have a full-fledged support for all of these frameworks in a way that you could design with Vaadin Designer, let's say, JWT UI that is using Vaadin components. That way we could actually expand and leverage these web components trend quite a bit more. So this is what we are kind of thinking right now. We haven't done that yet. We are kind of experimenting with that at the moment. And the reason why we haven't done this yet is that it doesn't really work. I mean, if you take a look at these standards and then go to caniuse.com and see whether they actually are usable right now. HTML templates works in most browsers except IE, so that's a bit of a disappointment. Custom elements works in all the Chromes you have, nothing else. So it's basically just any Blink-based browser for custom elements. Same goes with the Shadow DOM and HTML imports. So all in all, you can today use web components only in Blink. Tomorrow maybe Firefox. We don't know when Safari comes along. I truly hope that Apple releases this in iOS 9. But nobody knows. And Microsoft is building a new browser, so hopefully that finally supports all these standards out of the box. Luckily there is this thing called polyfill. Who has heard of Polymer project from Google? The confusing stuff about the Polymer is that we were thinking, and I guess most of the world were thinking, the Polymer is mostly about polyfills. Except that these guys, they actually split polyfills out of that project. So now that's available in webcomponents.org as a separate JavaScript file that basically implements these standards for most of the browsers. Anything since IE10 is their target. So they implement custom elements, HTML imports, Shadow DOM in this browser that really doesn't support this, so that you could use them today. The kind of challenging thing is that polyfills are version 0.5.3, so that's Google's way of saying that they are a bit shaky. On the other hand, they kind of have this matrix on their page saying that they are polyfilling quite a bit on most browsers, so you might be able to use them today. So it depends on which features you are using. So in a way, I guess, answer to the question when you can really use web components a bit vague. If you are only using evergreen browsers, that means the browsers that update themselves, and you are happy with the current state of the polyfills, go ahead, you can use it in production today. If you really want to have all of these standards, I mean all the features implemented, there is things like CSS sandboxing that is really hard to polyfill. You would have to wait for native implementations. And those native implementations, no one knows when they are ready. My guess is they soonest might be by the end of the year in production with the new IE browser or new Microsoft browser and iOS 9, but really don't know. Old browsers, they don't get even polyfills, so they are not polyfillable for, let's say, IE 9. Another topic, how do you build actually web components? Polymer is a nice JavaScript framework for building web components. So you create a HTML template and use that as a basis for web components. But when you're building something complicated, it might not work that well. I mean, we were building this vGrid. It's a huge project. I didn't think that it's that a huge project. I thought that this should be like a 6-month project, but it turned out that it's a 17-month project. And we have had 5 persons in this project working full-time just for building this grid. And it ended up being like 32,000 lines of code, where when you change one thing, it turns out that then it breaks in one of the browsers, or the performance degrades on one of the mobile devices, and it's like puzzle when you're building a component like this. We couldn't have done this in JavaScript. It's so complicated to kind of refactor such a code base. So instead we used GUID or Google Web Toolkit for building this. And the thing is that the Google Web Toolkit doesn't actually support web components right now. So we kind of built kind of support for exporting Google Web Toolkit components as web components. It's done in such a way that we register a new element, basically vGrid, and this element is implemented with new JS interop built into GUID 3 and experimental support in 2.7. So these are actually native HTML elements. They are not a layer on top of the HTML elements. And inside there we create shadow DOM. Inside the shadow DOM we create a traditional widget. So this vGrid is actually available also as a GUID widget that we just wrap with the shadow DOM and kind of export as a web component. So in a way, in order to build this thing that can be used with basically anything on the front end, we have multiple options. We have one option would be just JavaScript on top of Polymer. I think it's a pretty good option for simple components like progress bar and sliders. So we'll probably build many of the Vaadin components in JavaScript. But for a complicated component, it makes sense to use Java. In this case, Java directly on top of or actually in some cases, Java on top of the GVT elemental APIs. In case of Vaadin Grid, we actually are building a widget first and then wrapping that with the element and then exposing that as a component that can be used without even knowing that it's built with TWT. So if you want to kind of know the gory details, this is in GitHub. So if you want to build something with Google Web Toolkit and export a web component, go ahead and read the source. This is actually, I can recommend this truly. If you are building anything complicated, it makes sense to use Java. So how to get started? First of the designer that I mentioned, that's also available as an experimental tool right now in Vaadin Labs. So just go to vaadin.com/labs and you can just install that into your Eclipse today and start experimenting with that. It should be available as a commercial final product in a couple of months. Then we had a completely new project as well that I didn't mention earlier called Vaadin Elements. So this is an add-on for Vaadin 7 users for using any of those web components directly from the server side. So you can take any web component, let's say Google Paper component library, and use any of those Google Paper components from your Vaadin server application today. So this kind of bridges the gap between the web component standard on the client side and the server side Java. And the third thing is, of course, Vaadin components. So you can try out the demos, see how they have been built. This is in GitHub. You can download it from Vaadin Labs as a zip package. In zip package there are examples, tutorials, and APIs for AngularJS and JWT. It's also available in Power. So if you are using Power, anyone using Power, by the way? A couple of AngularJS guys. So you can use that from Power right now. So you don't have to download anything. It's also available from Vaadin CDN. So we opened up a CDN service for basically including this JS on any web page without downloading anything. So you can just build a static web page and put Vaadin component JS over there and start using vGrid and vSlider and whatnot. And if you want to use this vGrid from server-side Vaadin, just start using Vaadin 7.4. It's built right in. We also added a new distribution package called Vaadin Widgets into 7.4 for GUID developers who can use this on the client side without any server-side connection. So there are multiple options to use the same widgets. And I hope that this would be a way of kind of expanding Vaadin to new audiences in the future, so that we can support multiple audiences through multiple APIs for the same set of widgets, have awesome styling for that, and that way kind of get everybody to use Vaadin components. And these are free Apache license components, so there shouldn't be any reason not to use them. I guess that's it. Any questions?
I didn't understand the point of the shadow DOM. That was the reason behind DOM and things like that.
Yeah, so if you go to gmail.com and open up a Chrome inspector, it looks super complicated. And it's actually, it is a super complicated thing. And when everything is kind of put on the one web page, I mean thousands of divs on the one web page, when you start styling the thing, you easily break things. I mean, you say that, hey, divs should be red, and that would break Gmail quite badly. With Shadow DOM, you can encapsulate parts of the DOM tree inside Shadow DOM. It's kind of hidden from the rest of the web page. If you style something on your web page, it doesn't impact the divs that are inside Shadow DOM. On the other hand, if you are adding a style seed inside Shadow DOM, that only affects that Shadow DOM part of it. So that way you can make reusable components, because your styling is built only for those components. Make sense?
Yeah, so you create scopes inside.
Exactly. So that's the componentization we have had in Java for forever, and now that's available for client-side developers as well. Other questions? Or comments? Or tomatoes? So who thinks this is a cool idea to kind of split Vaadin framework into two components, client-side components and the server-side framework? Most. Who thinks this sucks? No one. Okay, thank you very much. And just to repeat, this is experimental stuff. To see the production stuff that you can use today, come to our booth and we can give you demos and free copy of Vaadin, Book of Vaadin for learning Vaadin. And anything that you build in server-side Vaadin right now, it will be future compatible with all the stuff that I was showing over here.